Have you ever stopped to think that, in the 21st century, there still isn't a road connecting Alaska to Argentina? We live in a world of bridges that span oceans, tunnels that link countries beneath the earth, and highways that cut across entire deserts. And yet, the famous North to South America road trip comes to an unexpected end, a dense and hostile jungle known as the Darien Gap. This interruption isn't the result of a lack of money or technological ability. On the contrary, engineers have already proven they can build massive projects in even harsher conditions. What exists here is something different, almost symbolic. It's as if nature had left a scar on the map to remind us that not everything is meant to be conquered. And this raises a controversy. Do we really need to complete the Pan-American Highway? What's fascinating is that this absence of a road tells a story far greater than it seems. It speaks of political dreams, risky expeditions, desperate migrants, and an ecosystem so precious it has remained untouchable. To understand why the Americas aren't fully connected by a single highway is to dive into one of the great modern paradoxes, the road everyone wants to see, but perhaps should never exist. Imagine someone with the dream of taking their car to Alaska and only stopping at the southernmost tip of Argentina. It would be a movie-worthy adventure, crossing landscapes that shift from snow-covered mountains to dry deserts. But reality is harsh. This journey isn't possible. Along the way, the Pan-American Highway simply ends. The asphalt that once seemed endless turns into dense jungle, a reminder that not every road connects destinations. This detail surprises many people. After all, we live in a world full of superhighways that slice across entire countries and bridges that link regions once thought unreachable. Even so, when it comes to the Pan-American Highway, the promise of a complete connection between the ends of the Americas dissolves into just a few yards of impassable land. For those who dream of the famous North to South America road trip, it feels like hitting a locked door halfway through. What's most curious is that this barrier doesn't exist because of a lack of technology or resources, but due to a natural obstacle called the Darien Gap, a green scar on the map that resists every attempt to be conquered. The Darien Gap is not just a stretch of land without a road. It's one of the most challenging and unforgiving environments on Earth. It spans about 60 miles of dense jungle mixed with treacherous swamps, where every step can feel like a struggle. There are no signs, no clear paths, just knee-deep mud, buzzing mosquitoes, and the constant sensation of being watched. Many who have crossed it describe the place as a nightmare with 1,000 demons, and it's no exaggeration. The environment itself seems to conspire against any visitor. Beyond the wild nature, the Darien Gap has also earned a reputation as a refuge for smugglers and groups operating outside the law. This makes the region doubly dangerous. The jungle already imposes its own risks, but the presence of organized human activity and illicit trades adds a very real layer of fear. Migrants who attempt the crossing in search of a better life report that the journey is not only physically exhausting, but also psychologically crushing. Picture yourself in a place where the humidity clings to your skin, the sounds of the forest never stop, and night falls quicker than you'd like. The atmosphere creates the feeling of being trapped in a living maze, where every tree looks the same and every step might take you deeper into the unknown. It is in this very setting that the Pan-American Highway comes to a halt, and the question that arises is, how did the dream of uniting the Americas with a single road begin? In 1923, in Santiago, Chile, a bold idea was born to unite all the countries of the Americas through a continuous road. At that historic moment, the notion of integration was not just logistical, but also political and cultural. They called this ideal Pan-Americanism, a movement that sought to strengthen ties among nations that, despite differences in language and customs, shared the same continent. The Pan-American Highway emerged as the ultimate symbol of that vision. It was as if engineers and leaders saw the road not merely as concrete and asphalt, but as an invisible thread of collective identity. Imagine being able to leave a small town in Mexico and reach Canada just by driving, or to depart from New York and end up in Buenos Aires experiencing every shift in climate and culture without ever leaving the highway. This promise inspired not only governments, but also dreamers who believed in the power of physical connection to foster true unity. What's curious is how quickly this dream found supporters in different regions, almost as if it were an irresistible calling. The project was announced at congresses, drawn on maps, debated in cafes and presidential offices. Many saw in it the opportunity to consolidate trade, tourism, and even continental security. Yet, as we'll see, reality proved that not every ideal fits neatly on paper, especially when nature decides to place a void right in the middle of such grand ambition. As the years went by, the construction of the Pan American Highway began to take shape. Country by country, mile after mile of road was opened, linking regions that once seemed far too distant. It was a milestone of progress, of modernity, of a continent reinventing itself on wheels. Each completed stretch fueled the hope that one day a seamless North to South America road trip would finally be possible. Yet amid all these advances, one place remained untouched: the Darien Gap. It was as if nature had left a firm no stamped on the map, a reminder that not everything can be shaped by human will. While machines carved through mountains and engineers raised massive bridges elsewhere, there, between Panama and Colombia, the road simply stopped. It was a striking absence, a void that drew more attention than the finished sections. This patch of land became, paradoxically, the most famous part of the entire Pan American Highway. It came to symbolize not just a missing link, but also a collective challenge. If we can build skyscrapers that scrape the clouds, why can't we carve out 60 miles of road through the jungle? That provocation opened the door to deeper study of the region's physical and environmental difficulties, challenges that soon proved to be more complex than any human project could ever anticipate. The Darien Gap is not just a patch of jungle, it is practically a natural fortress. The forest is so dense that sunlight barely reaches the ground. The soil, soaked by nearly constant rain, turns into deep mud capable of swallowing entire vehicles. On top of that, sudden floods transform narrow rivers into violent currents, creating deadly traps for anyone trying to push forward. For many, crossing this territory feels like facing an invisible enemy. And it's not only the climate that intimidates. The region is home to animals that reinforce its hostility: venomous snakes camouflaged in the leaves, scorpions appearing where least expected, and crocodiles lying in wait in the swamps. As if that weren't enough, the air is thick with mosquitoes carrying dangerous diseases like malaria and yellow fever. Jason Matlaw, a traveler who crossed the region in 2016, described the journey as unrelenting physical terror, marked by extreme exhaustion and a constant sense of danger. Now imagine combining all these factors: endless mud, relentless rain, deadly animals, and invisible diseases. It's a formula that explains why even the most advanced equipment can't guarantee complete safety. The Pan American Highway, which once seemed like a straight line of progress, runs into a true natural puzzle here. And this raises an even more intriguing question: if nature doesn't cooperate, has modern engineering managed to overcome the challenge? When engineers tried to take on the Darien Gap, they quickly realized it wasn't just a matter of clearing a path. Coastal projects were tested but soon failed against rocky peninsulas and the rivers cutting through the region. The Atrado Swamp, for example, proved its power. Reports say barrels used to measure its depth sank the equivalent of 15 stories into the muck. It was like trying to build a highway over quicksand. Comparisons with modern feats of construction make the challenge even clearer. Colossal bridges like the Hong Kong-Zhuhai-Macau link or even the Seattle Floating Bridge have shown that engineering can conquer seas and lakes. Yet the Darien Gap proved different: unstable ground, impenetrable jungle, and unpredictable weather rendered conventional solutions useless. It wasn't just about pouring concrete, but about facing an environment that rejects any intrusion. In the 1990s, a Colombian plan seemed promising, proposing modular passages that would preserve parts of the ecosystem. But it never took off. The costs were too high and the environmental risks enormous. And so, the Pan American Highway kept its void on the map, as if the land itself were saying, "Not here." Yet behind that no lies a treasure of incalculable value. The Darien Gap, which many see only as an obstacle, is in fact one of the richest and most strategic ecosystems on the planet. Its biodiversity shelters endemic and endangered species, functioning as a true natural refuge. It's as if the forests were designed to safeguard life in all its forms, creating a delicate balance that human presence could easily destroy. It's no wonder scientists treat it as an open-air living laboratory. Beyond that, this region serves as a natural barrier between the wildlife of North and South America. Without it, animals like coyotes could advance freely southward, threatening local species unprepared to compete. Jaguars, the dominant predators in the area, help maintain balance by intercepting invasive species before they can cause disruption. It is nature itself acting as guardian, without the need for fences or artificial borders. This ecological role reveals something fascinating. The same gap that interrupts the Pan American Highway ensures that vast regions preserve their natural identity. And while for engineers the Darien Gap is a problem with no solution, for biologists and environmentalists, it is a gift that must be protected. It is in this contrast between human challenge and environmental value that stories of expeditions and legendary adventures begin to emerge. The absence of a road has never stopped the boldest from attempting to cross the Darien Gap. In 1960, for example, motorcyclist Danny Leesis set out to make the crossing on his bike, but the jungle quickly defeated the machine. He eventually abandoned the vehicle and continued on foot and by boat, proving that in this place, human strength matters more than any engine. His story became almost legendary among adventurers dreaming of the North to South America road trip. The following year, a team decided to challenge the jungle with a Chevrolet Corvair. The result? It took 109 grueling days to cover just about 60 miles. Mud, rivers, disease, and insects turned the journey into a true survival test. The car, instead of being an asset, became a burden, bogging down repeatedly and forcing the team to rely on improvisations worthy of a survival manual. The crossing became as much a test of mental endurance as of physical strength. These examples show how the Darien Gap attracts not only migrants seeking opportunity, but also adventurers who see the jungle as the last great challenge of the Americas. Each story, with its failures and triumphs, reinforces the region's mystical aura. And it was precisely this fascination that caught the attention of political leaders who began to view the gap not just as an obstacle, but as a strategic piece in continental geopolitics. In the 1970s, President Richard Nixon saw in the Darien Gap an opportunity to turn the Pan American Highway into a political symbol. To him, the road would not only serve as a trade route, but also as a diplomatic weapon against the spread of communism in the Americas. The planned investment reached $100 million, an impressive figure for the time. It reflected the belief that the North to South America road trip could become a reality with US support. But it didn't take long for opposing voices to rise. The Sierra Club, one of the most influential environmental groups, raised the banner of preservation, arguing that opening the road would pose irreversible risks to the Darien Gap's biodiversity. On top of that, American farmers grew concerned about the possible spread of foot-and-mouth disease, which could devastate entire herds and cause billions in losses. Suddenly, the political dream became the center of heated debate. In the end, the project was blocked in court, turning into a political wound for Nixon. The so-called Nixon Gap became a reminder that neither economic power nor ideology can overcome the combined force of nature and civil society. Yet, while governments failed to solve the problem, others continued to risk everything to cross the region. If in the past the Darien Gap was the stage for daring adventurers, today it has become the setting of a much harsher reality, the crossing of migrants. In 2023, more than 500,000 people risked their lives to make it across this 60-mile stretch of jungle. Entire families, carrying only backpacks, faced raging rivers, endless mud, and the constant threat of violence. Many came from countries like Venezuela and Haiti, dreaming of reaching North America, but instead found themselves in a fight for survival along the way. The accounts are shocking: children walking for days under heavy rain, elderly people carried on shoulders, women exposed to risks of abuse, and diseases spread by mosquitoes. It is a crossing that shows no mercy, and yet thousands choose this path every month. While vehicles can never hope to conquer the Darien Gap, the human body, fragile as it may be, keeps pressing forward against what once seemed impossible. It's a painful contradiction, inaccessible to cars, but still endured by vulnerable people. This crossing reveals how the Pan American Highway, once meant to symbolize unity, now exposes inequality. For tourists and ordinary drivers, the road ends there. For migrants, it marks the beginning of one of the greatest challenges of their lives. And while the land route remains brutal, the modern world has already created practical alternatives that make the impossible routine for those with the resources to afford them. Today, anyone who dreams of completing the famous North to South America road trip no longer has to challenge the jungle. There are practical ways to bypass the Darien Gap, though at a considerable cost. One option is shipping vehicles by sea between Panama and Colombia, with prices hovering around $1,000. It's as if the highway had a maritime shortcut, allowing drivers to continue their journey without facing the green nightmare. Another alternative lies in the sky. The growth of commercial flights in the region has turned what was once an insurmountable barrier into just a few hours of travel. For tourists, less extreme adventurers, and even business travelers, taking a plane has become the obvious solution. In this sense, the Darien Gap no longer holds trade or tourism, serving more as a symbolic boundary than a real blockade. Still, the question remains, will we ever see a complete road? With so many alternatives available and the speed of modern transportation, the gap in the Pan American Highway continues to intrigue. And it's precisely in this space between functionality and imagination that futuristic ideas emerge, proposals that combine bold engineering with respect for the environment. With the evolution of engineering, many believe the Darien Gap could one day be conquered. Proposals have included submerged tunnels reminiscent of the Channel Tunnel, connecting continents beneath the Earth. Others have suggested modular bridges able to adapt to unstable soil and heavy rains. There are even those who advocate for green technologies designed to integrate the Pan American Highway with the environment rather than destroy it. The debate, however, always runs into cost versus benefit. Building a road through one of the most hostile ecosystems on the planet would demand billions of dollars and decades of work. And in the end, the question remains, would such a project really bring returns? After all, tourists and truckers already have air and sea alternatives. The issue then becomes not just technical, but philosophical. Is it worth sacrificing nature for something that may not even be necessary? Even so, discussions remain alive in universities and among visionary engineers. The idea of a fully connected continent is far too tempting to be forgotten. At the same time, though, there is a growing sense that preservation might be more valuable than conquest. This brings us to reflect on the true symbolism of the Darien Gap, not as a failure, but as a conscious choice to respect limits. The Darien Gap is not just an empty space on the map, but a powerful reminder that nature also imposes its limits. While the Pan American Highway stretches for thousands of miles, this gap insists on remaining untouched, almost like a silent protest against human expansion. For many scientists, this no from the Earth is a call for respect, a reminder that not everything needs to be conquered by force. More than a barrier, the Darien Gap is a living laboratory. Here, researchers study endemic species, the impact of tropical rains, and the unique interaction between flora and fauna found nowhere else on the planet. It also protects indigenous communities such as the Embera, Wunan, and Guna, who see the forest not as an obstacle but as the foundation of their identity and survival. In this sense, the highway's void is in fact a space full of meaning. Perhaps it is precisely this symbolism that makes us reflect. The road that was never built may represent the road we never truly needed. Instead of a connection paved with asphalt, the Darien Gap offers an invisible connection, a reminder that progress is not only about moving forward, but also about knowing when to stop. And it is in this balance that the story of this region lives on, still intriguing travelers, politicians, and scientists to this day. The Darien Gap remains one of the greatest geographic and political curiosities on the planet. On a continent filled with modern highways, airports, and bustling ports, there is still a stretch of just 60 miles that refuses to be conquered. The Pan-American Highway, which was meant to symbolize the unity of the Americas, carries within this void the mark of a limit humanity has not yet been able or perhaps not wanted to overcome. This absence of a road reveals a lot. On one side, the technical, environmental, and political challenges. On the other, the ecological and cultural richness the region continues to preserve. It's not just about connecting to points on a map, but about understanding the weight of human choices when confronted with nature. The Darien Gap is, at the same time, a barrier and a safeguard, an obstacle and a heritage. Will this void ever be overcome, or will it remain an untouchable symbol in the heart of the Americas? Share this video with those who also enjoy surprising stories and, of course, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to stay up to date with the great mysteries of our world.